Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen. It is the week 11 rapid rundown for your fantasy football teams presented by the one and only Fantasy Facts and fantasydata.com, where I get all the great numbers to make all these beautiful spreadsheets, which you'll see right here. Use the promo code FACTS, that's FAQS, and you can save 20% off your subscription, not prescription, your subscription over at fantasydata.com. We are going to jump straight into the show today because I am going to try very, very hard to actually hit my goal of 45 minutes in actual timing here. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump in. We're going to talk injuries. We're going to talk start sit advice. We're going to start fantasy data projections, try and give you a full look at the slate this week. Quick overview. There is really only three games worth kind of targeting if you use Vegas's over unders or really sports betting books over unders in order to target your games that should be high scoring games. We'll talk more about that in a minute. There's also only two teams that are projected to have, or sorry, three teams that are projected to have a total over 100 fantasy points. And that's really accumulating all the projections that are there. But it gives you a sense of the kind of lack of scoring that could come out of this week based on projections from fantasy data as well as based on the lines that are being put out there from the betting world. Granted, I'm using betting lines from New York. You could have something different out in your neck of the woods. I did just download all of the lines this like 5 minutes ago, so they should be as up to date when you hear this, depending on when you do. So first game gonna kick off tonight, Thursday night. We get we went back to like a mediocre Thursday game. Sorry. We have Tennessee traveling to Green Bay. Green Bay, yes, they just beat my Cowboys. Yes, it was horrible play calling. We're not going to talk about what happened last week, though. We're talking about this week. Neither of these teams are really expected to put up that many points, but there are some very interesting fantasy plays to get out of this game tonight. One, you are definitely starting Derrick Henry. Green Bay's defense has been good, but Derrick Henry is a stud. You are going to be starting Derrick Henry if you have him. Ryan Tannehill is back from his ankle injury. He was a full participant. That does bode kind of well for this offense, hopefully being a little bit more productive. However, I'm not that excited about Treylon Burks or Robert Woods. I am keeping them out of my lineups if I can. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine is another like just big play option right there. I'm not excited or thrilled about him being in any lineups, but if you have him in some DFS plays, he may rip off another big play like he did, but I'm not counting on that, especially not in any managed leagues. The Green Bay side of the ball, Aaron Rodgers has been a huge disappointment so far this year. Aaron Jones has been doing well. He did have a little bit of an ankle injury, but it looks like he's going to be back 100% from that. It doesn't look like there was he was limited in practice, but it looks like he's going to be back and playing without any issues. Romeo Doubs will be out. And aside from that, there's not many other big name players to keep in mind. Christian Watson, after his 3 touchdown game last week, we'll throw him in there as a big name play. He was a full participant. He was on the injury report this week, though. I am probably going to roll Christian Watson out there if I have him. Not trying to chase last week's points, but assuming that Aaron Rodgers can't continue to be terrible and this receiving core continued to be terrible. I think Christian Watson really benefited from the way the Cowboys were playing defense in that game. But I could see him being able to do that to other teams moving forward as well, especially if he can continue taking advantage with his speed, just speed in general. He's a very fast young man. Allen Lazard is an okay play. Outside of that, there's really not much to like in this game. The over-under is only at 41. The projected total, projected team totals for fantasy is the third lowest of the entire week, putting them right up there with Chicago, Atlanta, who we're going to talk about right now, because they have the lowest projected. They have the second lowest projected fantasy points total, but they have the second highest over under according to bettingdata.com. So there is a little bit of discrepancy there, which makes this game either going to be one, a whole lot more successful for fantasy, or a whole lot less successful in terms of betting. And if you have Justin Fields, you are rolling him out there. He looks absolutely phenomenal as of late. Defenses will start to figure out how to play defense against him, how to slow him down some. But he is right now in a must start. He's up there in conversations with Mahomes and Hurts and Josh Allen, and not because of his consistent play or being on, I would say, even the same talent level as those guys, but because of what he's been putting in the books over the past couple of weeks. He has to be in those conversations because he's put up monster game after monster game. So he is a definite start if you have him. I will put this out there, though. I definitely believe the other shoe will fall at some point. It's just a matter of probability. There's a pretty good chance that at some point that shoe will fall. But I'm not letting that deter me from putting him in, because I'm not going to go, well, I'm afraid of that bust game coming, so I'm not going to put him in when he could continue to boom and be the just kind of fantasy superstar he's been for the past couple of weeks. The biggest news of this game, though, is probably David Montgomery and what happens with his rushing attempts. I put out a tweet yesterday about this, just kind of breaking down the scenario. I do not see David Montgomery. Some people are saying he's going to get like 25, 30 touches. I do not believe that to be the case. What's been happening over the past like 10 weeks has been roughly 10 rushes for Fields, roughly 10 rushes for Montgomery, roughly 10 rushes for Herbert, and then a little bit of fluctuation each week in there, because they're rushing the ball about 35 times a game. So a little extra one to one guy or another. I do not see David Montgomery all of a sudden just accumulating all of Khalil Herbert's touches. I do think Tristan Ebner is going to get some work, but I do not see him getting the work that Khalil Herbert did. He is not the same explosive player that Khalil Herbert is. He does have some explosiveness. He does have some play, and that's perfectly fine. I like that, but I'm not putting him in to any managed leagues. I may throw out a DFS play, possibly with him in there. But again, that's still something where I do not see. I see David Montgomery getting about 15 touches in that range, and Ebner getting around 5. And then maybe there's a little fluctuation there, because they're still probably going to rush the ball around 35, possibly 40 times against a poor Atlanta defense. I am probably throwing out Cole Kmet as a tight end option. Again, he has just been booming, and I would rather ride that wave. Again, not trying to chase previous points, but I'd rather just ride that boom wave and hope it continues. Again, knowing that, well, tight ends are super variant anyways. There's not much to say he's going to get into the end zone again this week, except for the fact that he's done it a couple of times this past couple of weeks, and he's again going up against a very porous Atlanta defense. So there could be some opportunities there. And then in terms of receivers, I feel like you're essentially playing Russian roulette with your fantasy team, putting any of them in there. But sometimes the Russian mafia gets you and you got to play the game. And sometimes in fantasy football, you got to throw one of these wide receivers in, especially with wide receivers on bye that have been crushing it, like Christian Kirk is on bye, Tyreek Hill is on bye, Jalen Waddle is on bye, DK Metcalf, Lockett, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. You have a whole chunk of wide receivers that are on bye. You may need to play that Russian roulette with one of these wide receivers. If that's the case, you got to do what you got to do, man. I do not want them in a starting lineup, though, unless it is absolute desperation. On the Atlanta side of the ball, you're kind of in the same situation here with Pitts and London. They just have not been startable long term for you. They haven't been able to maintain any type of movement for you in terms of scoring. So again, probably going to play. You're probably going to play Pitts. It's a much larger conversation of, do you want to start them? Do you want to sit them? Do you want to bench them? Do you want to try and trade them? Do you want to drop them? That's a much larger conversation that we're not going to get into right now. But I think you do have a defense that could give up points here in the Bears. I think that is why the consensus over under in terms of the betting line is so high, is because both of these defenses give up points. Both of these offenses have guys that can make plays. The question is are they actually going to do it this week? And that's the big question. That's why I don't feel very confident about putting really anybody in on the Atlanta side except for Cordarrelle Patterson. He is the only guy that I have any type of confidence starting on that Atlanta side of the ball. Moving on to the Snow Bowl. I lived in Buffalo for a few years, like a decade. This is exciting to me. I've lived through Buffalo blizzards. This is exciting. I hope, and again, with safety and everything in mind, I hope they play in this game. I hope they play in this game. I hope it's 3 feet of snow. I hope it is a crazy game because I just kind of enjoy the absolute randomness of it. That being said, there is a possibility that there is some scheduling changes if the blizzard that is expected lives up to some of the hype. I have heard reports out there that they could get up to 6 feet of snow. That even that would be a lot for Buffalo. If it's like 3 feet, it's cool. Buffalo used to do a thing where they would give you a free ticket if you came and shoveled at the stadium, which we've done a couple of times in the past when I was living up there. Great way to go out and see the team. Unfortunately, they weren't very good when I was up there, but it's a great way to get out and see the team. If you live in Buffalo and you want to go shovel some snow and you want to see a Bills game, check, see if that's still a thing. It was definitely worth it when I had done it in the past. Now, the big thing here is keeping an eye on all of the reports coming out. If this game turns into a Snow Bowl, you are going to have to temper your expectations all across the board for this game. There's going to be less throwing. The running is going to be sloppy. The ball is going to get turned over. I'm not saying you can sit guys like Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs, Devin Singletary, but a guy like Stefon Diggs, you're probably going to need an alternative play. And same thing with Amari Cooper with the Browns. Definitely not in the same stratosphere as Diggs, but you're going to want an alternate play there if if this game gets played on Sunday afternoon in the snow. If it is played in the snow, I really like Chubb. I really like Singletary because I think that's what this game is going to become, is essentially a slugfest rushing game. They could end up with a lot more rushing opportunities. And with slipping, sliding, difficulty tackling, you could end up with a handful of just extra explosive runs. You could also end up with a handful of fumbles. So keep that in mind. This is a game that, for betting purposes, I'm probably staying away from unless I'm taking the unders on a lot of things. And in terms of fantasies, rolling out guys like the running backs, but really tempering some expectations for the receivers and quarterbacks unless you are super, super desperate. One piece of news, though, keep in mind that Deshaun Watson is coming back. He's able to practice with the team starting this week. That could raise some of these guys in Cleveland in terms of what they do next week. All right, moving on to the next game. We have Philly traveling to Indy. I called it last week with Jeff Saturday being able to rally this team. Granted, I don't know if that's exactly what happened, but I did say watch out for them Colts and Jeff Saturday. And hey, they were able to pull it out. I don't like the Colts getting 6.5 points in this game. The over under at 40, and most of that is the Eagles scoring that is expected to happen here. Again, you're playing Jalen Hurts, you're playing AJ Brown. He was on the injury report, but he said he's going to be fine and should play. He did have a bit of a dud game against the Commanders, but I do think that's just the normal kind of fluctuation of fantasy scoring. Go ahead and get him into your lineups. Miles Sanders, same thing, really fluctuated. He only got something crazy like one carry in the first half of that Monday night game. I think he bounces back. And outside of that, those are really your guys that you're going to start. Dallas Goedert's not there. I am not jumping on any of the guys. I know Cal Catrera was a big waiver wire claim. I'm not jumping on that train in any way, shape, or form. I do think that you start Jonathan Taylor in this game, but I would very, very much be watching out for him to get shut down in this game. The Eagles defense has been pretty good, and Jonathan Taylor has been dealing with some injury, but you're not going to start a guy of the you're not going to sit a guy of the caliber of Jonathan Taylor unless you're rolling out two guys that are just absolute studs above him. Maybe like Chubb and Derrick Henry or something like that would be the only way that I see you not playing a guy of the caliber of Jonathan Taylor. With Matt Ryan expected to start at quarterback again, I do believe this is good for guys like Pittman and Paris Campbell. It'll be interesting to see if Alec Pierce can kind of work his way back in. He was getting a little bit of love with Ellinger, but now that doesn't seem to be the case with Matt Ryan. You start Pittman, though. He is definitely the guy you want to roll out in this situation. Other than that, there's not really much to like in this game. I think the Colts they overperformed last week, I would say, and I don't expect them to do that against the Eagles. And I think the Eagles get right back to their winning ways in this game. And next up, we have the lowest over under and the lowest projected points in the Jets and Patriots game. This looks on all accounts to be a slop fest, kickers all over the place type of game. New England, they're giving 3.5 points. I kind of like this against the Jets. Belichick has the Jets in his pocket. He finds a way to just out-coach them, it seems like, every single time they play over the past about 20 years. And the Jets are a young team that makes mistakes, and that's the type of team that Belichick it seems he has a sixth sense to be able to take those type of teams out. He will feast on Zach Wilson's inability to protect the ball. And I kind of like the Patriots to cover this 3.5 spread, even though the Jets are on the up and up. The Jets have looked so much better this year than they have in recent years. I do not like this matchup for the Jets. And I don't like it for Zach Wilson. I don't mind it for Garrett Wilson and Michael Carter because somebody's going to get involved there. I also don't mind it for Tyler Conklin either. I think this could be a game where that tight end gets involved a good amount because, again, Belichick has a way of taking away your best option. And right now that best option seems to be Garrett Wilson. So this could be one of those games where Garrett Wilson gets shut down essentially for the entire game because they're rolling coverage. They're hitting him on the line. They're getting him out of his routes. They're really interrupting that passing game. And I could see that being the case with this New England defense shutting down Garrett Wilson. But again, this is one of those things where you're probably not going to be able to sit him unless, if you're somehow surviving the great guys on bye this week with Jacksonville, Miami, Seattle, and Tampa. One more time, the guys out on bye this week. If you're able to survive that, then yeah, go ahead and sit him if you can. But chances are it'll be tough to do that. On the New England side of the ball, I love Ramondre Stevenson, even though this is a tough rushing defense. I do like Ramondre Stevenson. And I do like Jacoby Myers, especially both of those as flex starts. I like Stevenson as an RB2. I like Myers as a wide receiver 3, essentially getting that volume play in a PPR format. If it's not PPR, both of those guys take a bit of a hit. I do not like Mac Jones in this matchup because Jets defense is what is moving this Jets team forward. The reason this Jets team looks good right now is because of what that defense is doing. And I think the Jets defense can disrupt this New England offense that isn't a superstar filled cast as well. But I expect Jones to be able to check it down to Myers and Stevenson enough to really be able to prop up their receiving totals. All right, and we got a comment jumping in here from Big Trev. Big Trev, what's up, man? What is up? Need to Rondell, Thielen, Tony, DPJ, Gallup, PPR. We haven't hit those games yet. But if you are going for upside here, I definitely like the Tony play and keeping him rolling in that situation. And I believe it is Rondell out of the other ones with an honorable mention to DPJ. Thielen kind of gets a little bit of a nod in there, but he's a guy that I am trying to move away from in a lot of different formats. I just don't see I don't see a lot of long-term love for Thielen. And Gallup is, again, Gallup and Thielen are kind of in that, like, they make out decent plays here and there. But they're not somebody that I'm going to be putting into my lineups if I'm trying to really score points, which again is always the that's the goal. But I think Moore and Tony are probably your top two guys, and then DPJ. And we actually did talk a little bit about the Cleveland Buffalo game. Really pay attention to what's happening there, because if they play in the snow, DPJ doesn't get any type of nod. I don't like if turns into the snowball. Absolutely not. I don't like Cooper, DPJ, or Brissett in that game at all if it turns into a sloppy snow game. If they move it to Tuesday, which I've heard some people talking about, but I haven't heard anything from like the NFL actually saying that they're considering it. If they do move it, then DPJ becomes a little bit more of an option. But the way that I would put them right now is Tony and Rondell, DPJ, and then Thielen and Gallup somewhere in there. Probably Thielen over Gallup. But at that point, you've already got your two, and you're good to go. Trev, I hope that helps you out. Hit us up with any more questions if you have them. All right. So that was the New England Jets game. We're going to go now to the Rams taking on the New Orleans Saints. This game we went from the lowest over-under of the week to the second lowest over-under of the week. And it's probably just not going to be a very good game again. There are a few more fantasy points expected in this game. Mostly due to the Saints having Alvin Kamara and Chris Olave. I really, really, really like those guys. Even though the only thing the Rams team has going for them, I feel like right now, is their defense. That offense we'll talk about in a second is, it is not good. It is terrible. So stay away from that. But the Saints start up Kamara, start up Olave. There has been, and I haven't seen anything definitive yet, there has been a little bit of talk about Dalton or Winston. We'll have to see if there's anything that comes out that, especially from the team that says this guy is going to be our starter. It looks like it's going to be Dalton at the moment, which makes me a little bit sad. I do want to see Winston getting out there and slinging the ball, but there is, again, the possibility. Dalton did have a 5-touchdown game earlier in the season. I do not see that being any type of trend. It hasn't been any type of trend moving forward, but he does have the capabilities to put up 2-3 touchdowns. And against a Rams team that just is not very good, we could, if the Saints can block up the Rams defensive line, or have Andy Dalton get the ball out of his hand and into space for guys like Kamara and Olave, they could take advantage of this matchup. So I do like Kamara and Olave moving forward. And on the Rams side, I don't like Stafford. Stafford looks like he's going to be out of the concussion protocol. I do not like him. I am not jumping on the Allen Robinson train. I kind of like Van Jefferson as a sneaky play, but again, there's not really much to like there. I think the only two guys that I would be starting in this is Tyler Higbee as a tight end option. He has been a security blanket all season long. We've talked about it essentially since week one. I've talked about Tyler Higbee Tyler Higbee as being a security blanket for Stafford. I think he continues that trend as long as it's there, especially with Cup out. This is going to be a game where I am not excited about really anything on this Rams side of the ball. And maybe Darrell Henderson. He's been around 9, 10, 11 points. If you're in one of those buy situations, like you're being targeted by buys, you're being targeted by injuries, like, yeah, put him in a lineup and get those 10 points. I would much rather do that than trying to play like a Kyron Williams or a Cam Akers or, a guy like, Caleb Huntley, or even like, I mean, I really love Tyler Algier, but like a guy like Tyler Algier, I'd rather get a confirmed, like, we know he's going to be getting the rock enough times to get around 10 points than trying to take a chance with somebody else in some other lineups. All right, before we jump to the next one, from Big Trev again, thanks, man. No, thank you. Think of Tony if Harmon and Juju are both out. Yeah, Juju's hit. I don't want to get into it, but that it looked like a flag should have been thrown from my perspective. But especially if Hardman and Juju are both out again, absolutely. I think Tony was able to feast the way that he did because of the injuries that happened in and before that game. So if that is continuing to be the case, I really like Tony moving forward. It'll be interesting to see what happens when that receiving core is healthy. And then, yep. So I should pre-read, but exactly. If one of them plays, I might not play them. Yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens if they are healthy. Probably looking at Thielen and Rondell. Unless Donovan People-Jones moves to Tuesday or Monday. It is so tough for me to trust Thielen. I don't know why. Maybe that's just my own personal bias, but I will say the Vikings offense does help that kind of happen for Thielen. There are plenty of opportunities for him to be able to get opportunities. And let me just take a quick peek. Dallas is playing against Minnesota. It could be another situation where Dallas is rolling their coverage, because you have to roll your coverage to try and not stop, because I don't think you can stop JJ. I mean, you all saw the one hand rip it out of the defender's hand. The defender actually kind of helped him corral it a little bit, but we won't go that route. It was still an absolutely amazing catch. Dallas is going to have to roll coverage to try and prevent that, which could lead to Thielen being open a little bit more. So I am not against it. I think it could be just one of my own personal biases where it's like, ugh, do I have anyone else? Do I got to start Thielen? All right, I guess I'll start Thielen. But thank you, Trev. Definitely give the show a follow. Give me a follow on Twitter. We're out there. We're here answering your questions. And definitely, subscribe, click the like button, stuff like that on the show if you don't mind. Really appreciate all that feedback from everybody out there. All right, moving on to the next game. We have the one and only Detroit Lions taking on the surprising New York Giants. We got both New York teams really surprising, and maybe that's just me living in New York, just kind of being a little like surprised, like just used to them not being, contenders. Both of them look like they are definitely contenders at this point. We have the Lions traveling to the Giants. This game has a pretty decent, a really grand scheme overall. It's a pretty average over-under around 45 points. But for this week, it is one of the better over-unders, one of the higher over-unders. And in this game, in terms of overall projected fantasy points, it's again a pretty decent game, with both teams being kind of average in their fantasy points projected. It's not one of those lopsided fantasy points games, which we have a lot of this week. So the Giants, you are starting Saquon Barkley. You are probably, honestly, you're probably playing Daniel Jones in this matchup. It's a pretty good matchup against the Lions. I like this matchup for him. And I am kicking myself because I took Darius Slayton out of my lineups last week. A bad process on my part because I was like, oh man, I had him in there and I took him out. I am not taking him out this week. I'm keeping him in because this is a Lions defense that can be beat. Yes, Darius Slayton made it up with a big play last week, but I do like Darius Slayton. I've been a Darius Slayton guy for like 2-3 years now of saying like, hey, he has the skill set. He can produce if he's in a situation. And right now, he is in that situation where his biggest competition is Wan'Dale Robinson, who's dealing with recovering from an injury. We should see Wan'Dale out there. I am not going to be putting Wan'Dale into any lineups just yet, but I'm going to, like I said, keep Darius Slayton into my lineups. I'd have to check some DFS sites to see the salary for Darius Slayton, but I would not expect it to be very high. If it is a high salary, I wouldn't be touching him. But if he's a discount, absolutely, I would be going after Darius Slayton there. On the flip side of the ball with Detroit, I really feel like you have the big question of Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. Which one is going to be healthy and being able to play? Jamal Williams is on the injury report. Let me just take a quick look real quick and see what I believe he practiced yesterday. Let me just look real quick. So Swift was a full participant. And no, Jamal Williams did not practice. I believe it was an illness, so he did not practice on Wednesday. If Swift is healthy, which he was a full participant, if he is fully healthy and Jamal Williams cannot go, that is what Swift owners have been hoping for this entire time, except for the fact that the Giants defense is actually a pretty solid defense. So definitely keep an eye on the health of this backfield, which if you have this backfield, you've had to keep an eye on it this whole time. I think really the auto start in this game is Amon-Ra St. Brown. It is going to be a tough defensive matchup for the Lions, but I think Amon-Ra can take advantage of it. And I think that, if Swift is the only healthy running back, this could be a really big game for Swift because the Giants can attack the quarterback. We might see some opportunities for Swift to be able to get some running lanes or get the ball out in space, which is where he is most effective. But other than that, there's not really much out here that you can put your hat on. All right, next up in the order, we have Carolina, the woeful Carolina Panthers traveling to the Baltimore Ravens. Big news here is in terms of injuries. PJ Walker is out, which means we get graced by Baker Mayfield's presence once again. I'm not happy about it. Let's be honest. I don't think there's many people in terms of fantasy circles, not real life. Because yes, real life. I'm sure Baker has tons of people who love and adore him that are super happy for him to be in this situation. But fantasy wise, this Panthers team was atrocious. And that's when they had Christian McCaffrey, the most dynamic running back, I would say probably in the league right now, on the team. They don't have him anymore. They do have D'Onta Foreman, who is a nice option. He has been doing quite fine. I do not like this matchup really at all for the Panthers. You are probably going to roll Foreman out there, though. He has been decent when he's been getting the start. It'll be interesting to see with Hubbard being healthy what that split looks like. When they were both healthy a few weeks ago, they both put up big games. It'll be really difficult to expect that from them in any way moving forward, especially when the defense doesn't have to respect Baker Mayfield throwing the ball. And DJ Moore, I'm sorry, he goes back to the bench for me. Yes, he's the only wide receiver in this setup, but he was unstartable. He was absolutely unstartable for the first 5 weeks of the season. He goes right back to that situation for me. I am not putting him into any lineups if I can avoid him and I would be doing things to absolutely avoid him moving forward. Throwback to Big Trev's question, like, yeah, I would start Moore over him. I would start Tony over him. And I mean, hell, at this point, like, it would be super tough. But depending on the rest of my roster construction, I might want, the 8 points out of Thielen rather than the 3 points out of DJ Moore that DJ Moore was getting you in the first 5 weeks of the season. Yes, DJ Moore has a higher ceiling, in my opinion, than Thielen does, but his floor and where he hits in terms of fantasy more times than not is not just the floor. He's in the basement. He's so far through the floor. So that's it. That's my rant on DJ Moore. Moving on. Baltimore side of the ball. Again, big news here. Again, with injury updates. Mark Andrews looks like he is going to be 100% back and healthy, which is fine. It looks like they have Gus Edwards coming back as well, which actually makes me a little sad because I feel like Kenyon Drake was kind of coming back a little bit to what he was, years ago when he was able to be a decent fantasy play. I think if we see a split here, I don't mind putting Drake into lineups as a flex option. I do not like the Gus Edwards option. If you have him, maybe, yes, there's that desperation situation, but I do not like that option. I do think that the Baltimore offense runs with the hot hand here, and that hot hand is Kenyon Drake. Mark Andrews, though, is an auto star. Lamar Jackson is probably an auto star for you because if you have him, you probably drafted him early, even though he's been hitting more like those back end QB1 numbers than that top 3, 4, 5, 6 that you really want out of him. But he's probably going to get somewhere in that range, and it'll be because he's throwing the ball again to Mark Andrews. You're probably going to get some Devin Duvernay play in this. He's a safe option. He has a little bit of upside, hoping to get a deep ball from Lamar. But other than that, there's not too much to like here. Isaiah likely goes back to that. Oh, I hope you get another opportunity because he was a lot of fun to watch when he did get opportunities. But I'm not playing anybody else like a Demarcus Robinson, James Prochet, anybody like that in this game. All right. Moving on, the last 1 o'clock game, we have the Washington Commanders traveling to Houston, which, I mean, it's a game. It's a football game. It's probably not going to be a very good one. Sorry, I forgot to mention the greatest spread was in that Baltimore-Carolina game. Baltimore is favored by almost 2 touchdowns. They're giving 13 points to the Panthers, which that's one of those type of games where I've done it before and I've been burned, but I've done it before and also made a little bit of money. This is a game where you might be able to bet the Panthers and the points and turn out in a pretty decent outcome. But again, with Baker, I feel like that's just so much harder to do at this point. But 13 points is a really big spread in the NFL. All right. Now, Commanders, Texans, couple of injury news and notes in there. It looks like Nico Collins and Brandon Cooks are going to be fully healthy and playing, which is good news for this offense. It's good news for Dameon Pierce because it should draw the defense back a little bit, even though the defense doesn't have to respect Davis Mills in the same way that they would have to respect some other quarterbacks. But Davis Mills has been a serviceable quarterback. He's been a fine game manager. He hasn't been the superstar that you get with some other quarterbacks, but I don't think anybody really expected that out of him. Dameon Pierce, though, if you got him, start him, fire him up. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for him. Davis Mills, maybe in a deep super flex. Again, he's a great game manager. I feel like he exceeds his projections pretty well. Obviously, there's some games where he lets you down. And then I think Cooks and Collins are options that you can put into your lineup. Again, I don't want it to be, they're not going to be a wide receiver 1. They're not going to be a wide receiver 2. You could probably get wide receiver 3 flex capabilities out of either of those guys, which is why you can kind of work them into a lineup here. Even though Washington really came out and put the brakes on the Eagles, this could end up being one of those kind of hangover situations that you see a lot of times in sports where a big emotional win like Washington just had over the Eagles could lead to a little bit of emotional drain, physical drain because of how hard they played. It could lead to a negative rebound here. But in terms of players on the field, Heineke is he's startable at times in situations. He's not a guy that I really want to roll out though. But if it came down to it between Heineke and Mills, I'm probably rolling out Heineke over Mills, just because he has more options with that receiving and he takes more shots, which, depending on your scoring, that's going to help you out more than Davis Mills is field management. So, like if you're playing in the Scott Fish Bowl, Mills holds a little more value because he's going to get probably a higher completion percentage and less turnovers, whereas Heineke is probably going to be throwing the ball into more dangerous situations, more turnovers, possibly more incompletions. Terry McLaurin, though, benefits from that when he's able to get downfield. Same thing with Curtis Samuels. Again, not a great play here, but definitely a flex. If you have multiple flex, Curtis Samuel fits into that role really well. And this backfield is exactly what we don't want it to be in fantasy. And that's that split where you never quite know who's going to be that guy. Brian Robinson had probably his best game of the season against the Eagles, at least on film, maybe not on paper, but definitely on film. He got first down after first down after first down, that's what keeps you on the field in the NFL, is continuously getting first downs, continuously moving the chain, because that's what helps your offense win in real life. In fantasy, though, you need receptions, you need touchdowns, you need big plays, which is why I think both of these guys can be flexed. I think you can flex Gibson. I think you can flex Robinson with, again, some tempered expectations, just never quite knowing what that split is going to be. But again, if you got 2-3 flexes, throwing that out there can be an option. And before we move to the next game, JSK 512 throwing a question out there: Titans or Bengals D? I'm gonna roll with the. We haven't talked about the Cincinnati pick game, but I'm gonna roll with the Tennessee defense tonight on Thursday night for two reasons. One, it is the short week for Green Bay. It's another emotional win for Green Bay. I was just talking about the emotional win for for the Commanders and how they could negative rebound from that. Could be the same situation with Green Bay. Could be the springboard to them playing better, but it's a very short week for them. They played Sunday night into now Thursday night. It's a short week for Green Bay. Tennessee should be just forcing the ball down Green Bay's throat. And if Tennessee can cover Christian Watson, that could really limit Green Bay. Or if Aaron Rodgers is just off by a foot or two on some of those deep plays, those go down as incompletions. And now that game is completely different. And you could see that with this Tennessee Green Bay game. So I like Tennessee for that reason. I also like them playing on Thursday night for a very variant thing like defense. Your defense can drop a 30-point game, or they could drop, like, depending on how your scoring is, they could drop like a -5 game. I had a kicker drop a -5 game last Thursday night, which made me have to adjust my roster to try and make up for that situation. I ended up losing by less than 10 points. I ended up losing by less than 5. I needed Miles Sanders to get 8 points. He got like 4. But so that can help you as you get the rest of your roster set up for the rest of the week. And then one more quick one here: Palmer or Watson at the flex. I'm assuming that's Josh Palmer for the Chargers, and Christian Watson at the flex. I would lean. I think I would lean Josh Palmer because of the matchup and because of a lot of the implied points. And we haven't gotten to that game yet, but spoiler, it is the highest over-under of the week: Cincinnati Chiefs and Chargers. It's also the highest fantasy projections between the Chiefs and the Chargers. There should not be any surprises there. I'm going to lean Palmer here because I feel like that gives you a nice little setup. But again, man, I don't think I can do it. I don't mind flexing Watson, but I don't think I would flex Watson over over Palmer in this situation. Um, and also, you probably shouldn't play a Sunday night guy. Sorry, a Thursday night guy in your flex. You would probably put him in your starting lineup and then adjust from there. Just saying, yeah, I get it. Like I do the same thing. Like he's really my flex play because here's my real starting wide receivers. But just in terms of organizing your roster, that's where you want to throw him in there. All right, and so Lucius Verenzis 44. Sorry if I butchered your name. My apologies. But would you trade Debo and Walker for Henry? I have enough wide receiver depth to handle the move. Just thinking of playoff schedules, Walker's looks atrocious and Henry's looks amazing. I would probably try and get a little bit more out of that if possible. I know that all trades are league dependent, but I would try and get a little bit more out of that because you're trading Debo, who, yes, has been less involved in his offense than really everybody playing fantasy kind of wants him to be, unless they're playing against him, and Kenneth Walker, who has been doing really well also. I would try and get another little depth piece out of that if possible, but I do agree. I think if you can upgrade to Henry, who is he's like the number one running back right now, and I'd have to check like league scorings and stuff like that, but he is definitely in that upper echelon. And like you said, his playoff matchup looks good. Playoff matchups can always look good and then turn into something else. But I do like the premise of this move to go out and get Henry. The one thing I will say though is really think about your depth at running back as well making this move. Granted, it's a 1-for-1 running back move, but if there is any type of injury, even if you don't make this move with Walker, thinking about like who else do you have that you could flip into that starting role if an injury were to happen. We are hitting that stride now, approaching playoffs, where we need to be able to think about which handcuff backup we have that we can put in if something like we just saw with Cooper Kupp done for the season. Dallas Goedert uh, with his shoulder injury. Zach Ertz. Granted, tight ends not as difficult to replace as definitely a guy like Cooper Kupp, but this is that type of season. All right, and another one here. Sup, man? Have PPR start 2, Watson, Myers, Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, and Elijah Mitchell. Keenan Allen is in my doghouse. I would have to check real quick to see if what his practice situation has been lately. I know Mike Williams looks like he's coming back and should be the starter. Keenan Allen was limited. I haven't heard anything definitive on the Keenan Allen side yet about him definitely being able to play. He is in my doghouse though. Elijah Mitchell is a clear question mark, which I know is very kind of counterproductive, but this could be a 1-game sample where we see Elijah Mitchell and CMC splitting the ball. It could be what Shanahan wants all along of them being in a split. It is going to be very, very difficult to anticipate what that is going to look like. So I think those two guys are options, but definitely a little bit further down. I talked a little bit before about Allen Robinson. I do not like this Rams offense at all. I do not think that Allen Robinson just jumps right into that Cooper Kupp role. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to play those two guys. Depending on the rest of your roster construction, I don't mind Christian Watson as a play here because of the upside that he brings. Yes, it's a little bit of chasing points from last week, and that's never a good idea. But if we see the defenses again trying to shift to stop things like Aaron Jones, Dillon, trying to cover Lazard instead of Watson, we could see Watson continuing to take advantage, especially with his physical traits. So I don't mind Watson as an option here. As I mentioned, I think the Jets can compete with the Patriots, which makes Myers a little bit more of a and the fact that it's a half PPR makes him a lot less exciting as a start there. And you threw it in there also, Baby Santa. Limited, he says he's not coming back until he's 100%, which again, that's I fully respect that on a personal level. Good for you, Keenan Allen. On a managing my fantasy teams perspective, like, come on, man. I need you to tell me what it is. Let me know so I can get you in or out of a lineup. So after kind of going through them all, I actually kind of think Watson is my guy to be an upside guy, and then it's probably Elijah Mitchell. Just thinking that, assuming that it's going to be that kind of even split with him and CMC. Shanahan said that's kind of what they want to be able to do. So I think Mitchell gives you a kind of a nice safe floor. Watson gives you a nice upside play there. I don't mind putting both of those two guys in there. And then one more for defense here: Raiders D or Titans D. Um, I don't think I could. I don't think I can say to anybody with any type of confidence to start the Raiders defense. And yes, I know they are playing against Denver, and that's literally the next game on the slate that we're going to talk about. So that's a nice little jump in segue into it. I don't think I can tell anybody to start the Raiders defense because of just what they've let up so many like 17 point 17 to nothing leads they've let get blown. And so I don't trust that Raiders defense. And again, I know Denver's offense is just atrocious, but I would, especially a managed type of league, I want to know with the team that I'm putting out there, like what get a sense of what I'm going to get out of them. And I think and I'd much rather play that Titans on Thursday night there. Now, thank you, Baby Santa. Again, like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate everybody being able to jump in and jump into the show. And last one, oh, great question. Brian Robinson or Elijah Mitchell? I'm gonna go with Mitchell. I like the team a lot more. I think San Francisco is a more efficient, explosive team, which means Elijah Mitchell can get kind of secondary burn from that explosiveness. He can get red zone opportunities. He can get that, a Debo and Ayuk, who are great downfield blockers, doing that for him. Whereas I feel like the Commanders are just not quite there yet. And also I feel like Brian Robinson is the plotter in this Commanders setup, where it seems like both Mitchell and McCaffrey are interchangeable in what San Fran wants to do. Plus, Arizona's defense, especially if Budda Baker is going to be a question mark again this week, Arizona's defense is not threatening. Yes, Houston's defense is about as threatening as a baby kitten. But I do think that Mitchell has a little bit more more upside than Brian Robinson does. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that one. All right, we're going to jump now. We got 5 more games, and I love everybody jumping in here. Again, I love it, but I do need to try and wrap everything up in the next 10 minutes. Definitely keep hitting those questions, though. Hit the show up. Hit us up on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter. That is where I am most. But definitely hit us all up with all your questions. And let's jump real quick to the Raiders. And Denver, like I mentioned, Denver is, kind of atrocious. There was a great tweet put out that if they had only scored its 19, 18, 17, I forgot the exact number, points in regulation, they would be like 8-1. But their offense is just bad. Let's just say bad. Let's not get too much bad. Russell Wilson, I do not want to roll him out, even though, yes, the Raiders defense can be scored on. I don't want to roll out Russell Wilson. I will throw out Courtland Sutton, especially with Jerry Jeudy looking like it's that he may not play. Keep an eye on that because Jeudy has been a little bit more involved as of late than Courtland Sutton, but keep an eye on those matchups there. Really, the only play that I like in this is Dulcich as a tight end option. Other than that, there's not a whole lot that I like. I don't like Melvin Gordon unless, again, it's one of those flex plays where it's like, he'll get me 8 points. Okay, I need something. And it's like, if it's Melvin Gordon or Cam Akers, throw Melvin Gordon in there. But if it's Melvin Gordon or Elijah Mitchell, much rather have Elijah Mitchell in the lineup. And one more in here. If Gus doesn't play, Kenyon Drake or Elijah Mitchell, I would probably lean Drake over Mitchell in that situation based on volume. And I feel like that's where I would feel happier going with that situation. Again, a little bit of finding out what happens as we get closer to the games. But I think I would rather rule out Drake based on volume and him still having a little bit of explosiveness, and the Ravens still having a pretty good offense around him to put him in situations to be good. All right, one more question. RB flex position PPR. Who should I start? DeAndre Swift, Brian Robinson, Darius Slayton. Oh, my boy Darius. Adam Thielen start 2. Definitely keep an eye on Jamal Williams. I believe it was just an illness, so it looks like Jamal is probably going to play. But if he is out, this makes this question, at least one part of it, super easy, and that it is DeAndre Swift that is going to be in there. And I'm going to roll with Slayton as an option here, especially against a weak Detroit defense and looking like he is going to be the guy in this offense. Like I said earlier in the show, I have been a Darius Slayton guy. I just always trying to hope that he gets into a situation. When he's in these situations, he does perform well. He did last week. This week should be, again, another great situation for him. Hopefully he can break off another big opportunity, another big scoring play like he did last week. But even without that, I still think that he gets incorporated in this game enough, especially with the Lions defense not being very good, that you can go ahead and roll him out in there. If Jamal Williams is healthy, it'll be interesting to see between Swift and maybe Thielen, maybe Robinson. That's where it gets a lot more shaky. Because it is full PPR, I might go with Adam Thielen over Robinson because Robinson really hasn't been involved in much of the receiving game. And I'd probably lean a little bit more Thielen, even though Thielen isn't one of my guys. I kind of talked about that a little bit sooner. And it looks like you said flex. Brian Robinson, DJ Moore, Christian Watson, Paris Campbell. I mentioned before, I do not like DJ Moore in this situation. Baker Mayfield was just atrocious with him in the beginning of the season. I don't like that at all. I do like Christian Watson's upside. I also like the fact that he's playing on Thursday because if he does kind of poo-poo the bed, you can start making some adjustments and figure out like, okay, here's if I'm debating between a guy like Brian Robinson or Paris Campbell for this the next flex start, Brian Robinson isn't going to get you that big explosive outcome unless somehow he gets like 2-3 touchdowns, which granted they're playing against Houston. There's a little bit of an opportunity there, but Paris Campbell may have a little bit more of that because of the PPR options there. But right now I'd probably be rolling with Watson and Robinson and then being prepared to make a switch after the Thursday night game, seeing what Christian Watson put out there. Christian Watson drops another 30-point game. I don't mind rolling Robinson out because chances are he's probably going to get you more points just based on the fact that he's going to get like 80 rushing yards. He's probably going to be somewhere in that range. And if he hits a touchdown, boom, he just made you an easy RB2, maybe borderline RB1 output with 15, 16 points. And so that's where I would go with that one. Start 2. I think I hit both of those ones. And thanks, man. Have a good day. No, man, you have a good day. All right. Now let's go ahead and close this out. Las Vegas, you're starting Adams, you're starting Josh Jacobs, you're probably rolling out Derek Carr in a super flex. I don't necessarily like him in a one quarterback situation. And Foster Moreau has been startable. I don't mind going ahead and throwing him out there again, especially with the tight ends injuries that we just had, as well as the tight ends that are there's not really that great of tight ends on bye, but Cade Otton has been really good. Been a big Cotton believer for the past really since the start of the season. Moving along, my Cowboys traveling to Minnesota. This could be a really fun game. These are both teams with playoff intentions. It is one of the higher over-unders of the week. You would have to be insane to not find a way to get Justin Jefferson into your lineup. Christian Kirk, again, probably a fine QB, late QB streamable options. Dalvin Cook, you're getting out there. And again, Thielen, Hawkinson, those are guys that you can probably work in. They're not guys that I'm super high on, but definitely guys that you can work in. The Cowboys, CeeDee Lamb is really starting to establish himself in the role that everybody wanted him to be, that number one wide receiver. So go ahead and keep him rolling out there. Dak is definitely a guy you can roll out there. The big question is the Pollard versus Zeke situation. We do not know what this split is going to look like as we continue moving. Pollard is projected for 12 points. Zeke is projected for 9 points. These are guys that, depending on which one you have and what other options you have, I'm okay with flexing them. They're not guys that I really want to feel like, okay, this is my RB2. This is my RB3. Just because, again, it's going to be hard to tell what you actually get. And the Cowboys seem dead set on giving Zeke the ball. The question is Zeke 100% healthy? Can Zeke have the explosiveness that we've seen in the past? And we've kind of seen it diminish a little bit over the past 2 years, partly due to injury. Can he continue that? Or does Pollard start really getting more involved? Do we see it get closer to a 50-50 split here? It's really going to be interesting to see what happens with that in this game. And then Dalton Schultz is an auto start at the tight end position, again, with the injuries that are out there. Moving along, we actually got a question popping in. Let's hit that before we jump to the next one. Kind of rough on flex option this week. Skowronek, that is rough, sir. As soon as you, if that's the first name that comes to mind, yes, I agree. That is rough. George Pickens, Elijah Mitchell, or AJ Dillon. We just talked a good amount with Mitchell as an option there. AJ Dillon going against Tennessee. I don't really love it. Tennessee's defense has been beaten at times, but they're usually a good run stopping defense. And AJ Dillon doesn't offer a whole lot outside of that running, regular kind of just hitting the hole, hitting in between the tackles type of running. So I'm not leaning Dillon there. I think George Pickens may be your option here. Cincinnati's defense can get beat. George Pickens should be moving up in the pecking order with Chase Claypool being out. The biggest question mark, of course, being can Kenny Pickett actually get him the ball? I think that's part of the reason why we've seen such amazing catches from George Pickens is because the way that he goes up and gets the ball is able to keep some of those. That was kind of a bad pass, Kenny Pickett. Oh, but Pickens got that play. I think I would go with Pickens in this situation. I don't like that Rams offense. I don't like what could be. There's a whole lot of hope, and like the GIF from Shawshank Redemption, hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can kill a man, or hope can drive a man insane. That's the actual quote, I believe. I think that we're getting a lot of that with the Rams of hoping what could be. Now that Kupp is not there, I don't want to touch it. I feel like that is a really dangerous situation for hope. So yeah, roll out George Pickens. That's my guy for this situation. Thank you, Dr. Clutch. By the way, great name. Only reason I'm kind of hesitant because starting him and Deontay. Yeah. But I mean, over those guys, though, yes, you usually want to get one. You usually want to put one guy in and put all your eggs in that basket, fantasy wise, and again, kind of hope that that's what it is. But I could see Pittsburgh needing to throw the ball to keep up with Cincinnati, and that's actually the game that we're going to talk about right now. So thank you for a great segue. I could see Pittsburgh needing to throw the ball in this Cincinnati game because you are going to be starting Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Hayden Hurst. All five of those guys are startable, especially with Chase kind of needing time. And I think since Cincinnati is still going to be able to score in this game, their implied point total is just under 25. They're only giving 4 points, which is really not a great betting number. But they're only giving 4 points to the Steelers, which to me means that hopefully we get some action with the Pittsburgh team throwing the ball. Which no, that does not mean I'm starting Kenny Pickett in any way, shape, or form. But it does mean I think you can start Johnson and Pickens, thinking that you're starting essentially two, wide receiver fours or wide receiver fours with an option to get up to that wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 2 number. If we get a big catch, if we get, Pittsburgh being able to move the ball a little bit, it could be an option. for them to get into the end zone. Najee Harris is dealing with knee discomfort. Really have no clue what that means, but sounds like he should be fine with it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get Najee Harris into lineups if you can. Well, I'm gonna put him in lineups as a more of like a flex option. He's not a guy that I really want to like force into options. He just hasn't been able to produce the way that we've wanted. But again, to answer your question, Dr. Clutch, I don't mind the Pickens Johnson one there, and especially if it's Pickens or any of these guys, maybe if you still feel a little hesitant, maybe I would go with Mitchell because I feel like he offers more upside there. I would do Mitchell over any of Skorenik or AJ Dillon in this particular case. But again, I still feel like there's a little bit of room there where both of these guys can get you around that 10 to 15 PPR if it turns into that like hey, we got to pass the ball, we got to keep things moving, and I think that's what they're going to have to do against this Bengals defense. All right, 2 more games. This is the game of the week. I don't think there's really much debate about this game being the game of the week, and that's Kansas City taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. A whole lot of guys. This is really just a start them all, fire them all up. This is a game, the over-under as set is at 50. This is a game that could end up with an over-under at like 70 with both teams scoring in, 35 or more. You're starting Mahomes, you're starting Kelsey. I think Juju's a fine play here. Juju, if he is healthy, is a fine play here. Tony can be a fine play here, especially if there are injuries. We talked a little bit about that earlier in the show. And then there's the running backs are really the question. Like those are the black sheep of the family there. Like you can kind of push them to the side. I don't think any of those guys are auto starts. And I don't think they become startable until we really get a sense of what this team becomes in terms of rushing. But right now, it is fire up all the pass catchers, fire up Pat Mahomes because they'll find ways to get the ball moving. For LA, it looks like Mike Williams is going to be back and healthy, which is great news. They need that to happen. You are playing Austin Eckler. You're playing Justin Herbert. You're playing, like I said in an earlier question, I think you could go ahead and roll Palmer out there. Keenan Allen, unless he comes out and says, I am playing, I'm not even putting him in my lineup because I don't want to be in the situation where he says like it's questionable, and is a last minute out. I'd rather be like, oh crap, he played, than oh crap, he didn't play and he's stuck in my roster. So I'm not putting Keenan Allen into any rosters until it is like, yeah, I'm in, guys, I'm playing. Mike Williams, though, I think jumps right up into that wide receiver, probably 2 conversation, especially in this game. And then Everett dealing with an injury. I haven't heard anything new about that. He was limited in practice this week on Wednesday, so that's something to keep in mind. Everett has been a startable option, and in a game like this, he becomes even more of a startable option for you. And then lastly, but not leastly, we go to San Francisco and Arizona. Hopkins has been an absolute machine. Fire him up. Kyler Murray looks like he's going to be decent in this game. Go ahead and fire him up. James Conner, go ahead and fire him up. Rondell Moore, go ahead and fire him up. This is a game that could be a little slow moving in the first quarter. I expect it to be a lot more fast moving in the second quarter, especially as Arizona gets to the point of needing to really like, okay, guys, we haven't been able to score the first few times. We got to figure out how to push the ball. I see that being the way this game goes because San Francisco still has a pretty solid defense. San Fran, you're playing Christian McCaffrey. You're playing Elijah Mitchell as a flex. I don't think that's a bad option. Debo, even though he's been very underwhelming, I don't think you can sit him unless you have like great options outside of it. So he's probably going to be in your lineup. And Ayuk has been producing. I think you can start as a wide receiver 3 pretty confidently. And then of course, though, you be ready for that week. Who knows when it's going to happen, but that week where all of a sudden Ayuk has been doing good, Debo who's been doing bad, flips real quick. And now we're in a different situation. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is it. I got to get back to work. I'm doing this on my lunch break. Thank you all for jumping in. Everybody who jumped in with the comments, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Be sure, give the show a follow on Twitter at the Fantasy Facts. Give at Fantasy Data a follow. Give me a follow at FF the At Home Dad. Go ahead, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the notification button for the channel, for Fantasy Data channel. And with that, I'll catch y'all on the flip side.